You finally got the promotion. The relationship is healthy. Money isn't tight anymore. You can pay your bills without that knot in your stomach. You should feel relief. You should feel proud. But instead, sitting in your comfortable life, you feel guilty, like you've done something wrong, like you're betraying someone by being okay. And the most confusing part? You haven't hurt anyone. There's no rational reason for this feeling, yet it sits in your chest like a stone, whispering that your happiness is dangerous, that joy itself is a transgression you're committing against someone you can't quite name. This isn't the guilt of having done harm. This is something else entirely. Maybe you recognize this pattern. You reach a certain threshold of happiness or success, and then, almost like clockwork, you unconsciously manufacture a crisis. You get sick right after the achievement. You pick a fight during a period of peace. You lose your keys, your wallet, your focus during moments of abundance. It's as if there's an invisible ceiling on how much joy you're allowed to have before something inside you says, "That's enough," and pulls you back down. You drop back to a familiar level of discomfort, back to struggle, back to what feels, strangely, like safety. You can only tolerate this much happiness before you sabotage it, and you've learned to do this so automatically that you don't even see yourself reaching for the break. There's a strange sensation that follows you through good moments, this feeling that your joy is somehow stolen from someone else, that if you're at ease, someone somewhere is paying the price for it. So when you talk to your family about good news, you minimize it. The vacation was okay, but it rained the whole time. I got the raise, but the taxes are brutal. You downplay every achievement, soften every joy, as if admitting you're happy would be cruel. And when something good happens, a windfall, a stroke of luck, an unexpected gift, you feel compelled to give it away, to overgive, to compensate. You pay what feels like a guilt tax just to justify your existence in the world. Somewhere deep inside, there's a question haunting every successful moment. Who am I to have this when they didn't? Your body has learned to punish joy. After achievements, you collapse. Migraines arrive the day after the celebration. The flu hits right when you finally have time to rest. Exhaustion floods in the moment things get easier. Even when there's nothing that needs doing, you can't sit still. You manufacture tasks. You create problems to solve, because somewhere along the way, you learned that feeling good means feeling unsafe. That piece is a prelude to punishment. Your body remembers what your mind tries to forget, that in the home you grew up in, being too happy made you visible, and being visible when someone else was suffering felt like a betrayal. So you've learned to stay small, to stay worried, to keep one foot in the struggle, even when the struggle is over. Because if you fully step into joy, if you really let yourself feel how good your life has become, something inside you believes you'll lose the only thing that ever mattered, your connection to the people who raised you. This is what you're living in, this invisible architecture of guilt that turns every good thing into a question mark, every moment of ease into a moral dilemma. And the question that must be asked now is this: where did this come from? Why does your body treat happiness like a crime? Why does success feel like abandonment? Why does the very thing you worked so hard to build, a life that's finally okay, feel like the most dangerous thing you've ever done? The answer isn't in you. It's older than you. It lives in the silent contract you never knew you signed. You learned to read the room before you learned to read books. As a child, you scanned your caregiver's face the way a sailor reads the sky, looking for signs of what was coming. Was it safe to be loud today? To laugh? To take up space with your needs? In homes where a parent carried chronic depression, overwhelm, or the weight of their own unresolved grief, you learned an equation that would follow you into adulthood. Connection requires matching their mood. If your mother was heavy with sadness, your brightness felt like an intrusion. If your father was drowning in stress, your ease highlighted his struggle. You learned that resonance, becoming the emotional mirror of the room, was the only reliable way to stay close. So you began to dim your light, not dramatically, not all at once, just enough to stay in attunement. Just enough to not be the one thing in the house that reminded them of what they couldn't have. This was affective dampening, the slow, steady practice of turning yourself down so that your existence wouldn't hurt the people you needed most. And somewhere in those thousands of small adjustments, you signed a contract you didn't know existed. I will not be happier than you are. I will not surpass the ceiling you couldn't break through. I will stay within reach of your pain so that you are not alone. This wasn't a conscious decision. You were a child. You didn't sit down and negotiate terms. But your body understood what words could not yet say. If you became too joyful, too free, too alive, you risked rupturing the one connection that kept you tethered to the world. So you stayed close. You stayed small. You learned to carry just enough worry, just enough heaviness to prove you hadn't abandoned them. And the contract became your compass, an invisible agreement that said your flourishing was conditional on their capacity to witness it without pain. This is how limitation gets passed down. Your father was a gifted artist who spent 30 years working a job that broke him. He never spoke about the dream he buried, but you felt it in the heaviness that filled the house. And now, as an adult, every time your own creative work gains recognition, you feel a crushing wave of something you can't name. You sabotage. You procrastinate. You keep yourself in a state of struggling potential, never quite failing, never quite succeeding, because to surpass him would be to illuminate what he lost, to make it unbearably clear that the ceiling he hit wasn't inevitable, that it was a choice born of his own fear or his own inherited contract. And you can't do that to him, even now, even though he'll never know. Or maybe it was your mother who stayed trapped, in a marriage, in a town, in a version of herself that was too small for the life force she carried. And now you find yourself unable to commit to freedom, unable to take the leap she never took, because some part of you believes that your liberation would be the final proof of her captivity. This is invisible loyalty, the way you align yourself with the struggles of those who came before you, as if their limitations were a badge of membership in the family. As if to break free would be to break faith. You became the compensation child, the one who would make up for their disappointments, carry their unlived dreams, justify their sacrifices. But the cost of that role is that you can never fully arrive. Because if you do, the story stops being about redemption and starts being about what they could have had if only they'd tried. And if your family came from displacement, from war, from poverty, if they crossed borders or buried children or worked themselves to the bone in factories and fields, the contract takes on an even deeper weight. We suffered so you could have a better life. It sounds like a gift. It sounds like permission, but embedded within it is a double bind. You are commanded to succeed, but you are implicitly forbidden from enjoying the success too much, because to truly feel ease would be to forget the cost. To live without the weight of remembering would be to dishonor the sacrifice. So you work the comfortable job, but you carry a psychological burden that matches the physical load your grandparents carried. You live in safety, but you manufacture anxiety to prove you haven't gone soft. Your ease feels like a mockery of their pain, so you ensure you never feel too easy. You pay the debt by staying loyal to the suffering, by making sure that even in your better life, you are still, in some essential way, struggling alongside them. But here's what nobody told you. The debt was never meant to be repaid through your pain. They didn't survive so that you could replicate their suffering in a different form. They survived so that the lineage could finally breathe. But you can't see that yet, because the contract says that to breathe fully would be to leave them behind, gasping. And so you stay, not in the place they lived, but in the emotional territory they inhabited. You stay stuck as an act of love, but love, when it's tangled with loyalty to limitation, becomes the very thing that keeps you from honoring what they actually gave you, the chance to be free. And yet, even knowing this, even seeing how the contract was formed, doesn't make it easy to walk away from, because the mechanism that keeps you bound runs deeper than understanding. It operates in the architecture of how you relate to success itself. Now you understand where it came from. This contract you never consciously signed, but understanding the origin doesn't make the break release. Because the guilt isn't a malfunction. It's not a bug in your system that needs to be fixed. It's a feature, a protective mechanism doing exactly what it was designed to do. When you begin to accelerate into joy, into freedom, into a life that finally feels spacious, the guilt arrives like an alarm signal. It's saying, you're violating the treaty. You're moving too far from the agreed-upon emotional baseline, and so it pulls you back to worry, back to contraction, back to the familiar territory of shared struggle where connection feels guaranteed. The break isn't trying to hurt you. It's trying to protect the parent you internalized, the one who couldn't handle your happiness without feeling the weight of their own unhappiness pressing down harder. Because somewhere deep in your psyche, there's an equation that was written in childhood and has never been revised. If I take more joy, I leave you with more pain. Happiness becomes a zero-sum game. Your ease means their abandonment. Your flourishing highlights their stagnation. And so every step forward feels like you're walking away from someone who can't follow. This is why your guilt spikes not when you fail, but when you succeed. Not when things fall apart, but when they finally come together. Because success means outgrowing the family's emotional capacity. It means you've moved beyond the range of what they could hold, what they could witness without it hurting them. And the guilt whispers what it's always whispered: I will stay stuck with you as an act of love. Your contraction, your refusal to fully inhabit your own life, is misguided loyalty dressed up as devotion. You're not afraid of failure, you're afraid of success, because success feels like leaving them behind in their despair, alone in the dark, while you step into the light. And this is the bind that keeps you circling the same altitude, never quite landing in the life you've built. Achievement doesn't just bring the risk of external judgment or public failure, it brings the much deeper risk of excommunication from the tribe, of becoming unrecognizable to the people who raised you, of discovering that the closer you get to your potential, the further you drift from your family. Success highlights parental limitations by contrast. Your thriving makes their stuckness visible. Your freedom illuminates their captivity. And some part of you has decided that it's better to stay dim than to become the light that shows them what they couldn't reach. This is why differentiation, becoming your own person, separate from the family emotional system, feels like disloyalty. Because in the contract you signed, separation and abandonment are the same thing. To grow beyond them is to betray them. To become fully yourself is to prove that you don't need them anymore. And the child inside you believes that not needing them means losing them entirely. But there's another layer to this mechanism, a deeper architecture that keeps the break engaged. Family systems operate on an invisible ledger of merits, an unspoken accounting of who owes what to whom. You were born into a lineage marked by suffering, by sacrifice, by dreams that were buried before they could bloom. And according to the ledger, you owe an unpayable debt simply for being born into that inheritance. Your parents couldn't give you what they never received. They were unpaid by their own parents, never given the permission, the encouragement, the spaciousness to become fully themselves. And so they couldn't pass that gift to you. But the ledger doesn't account for that. It just says you owe. You owe for the sacrifices they made. You owe for the pain they endured. You owe for the life they gave you, even if that life came wrapped in limitation. And according to the ethical bind encoded in the ledger, the only way to honor your family is to replicate their pain, to carry what they carried, to prove through your own suffering that you remember, that you haven't forgotten, that you're still one of them. Your happiness reads as refusing to pay your dues, as taking the inheritance and leaving the debt behind. And so the guilt keeps you tethered to the limitation, not because you're weak, not because you're broken, but because you're loyal. And loyalty, when it's frozen in place, becomes the very thing that keeps the lineage from healing. This is why the break won't release on its own, because releasing it feels like defaulting on a debt that runs deeper than you can see, a debt written in the language of survival, inscribed in the body before words existed. But the mechanism doesn't live only in your mind. It's written into your flesh, your nervous system, the very way your body has learned to respond to the feeling of being alive. The mechanism doesn't just live in your thoughts. It lives in your cells, in your tissues, in the way your body has learned to respond to the very feeling of aliveness. Through thousands of micro-interactions across your childhood, your body absorbed a fundamental truth. Joy equals danger. You were told to quiet down when your laughter disrupted your father's exhaustion. You learned to make yourself small when your excitement made your mother's depression more visible by contrast. You felt the shift in the room when your vitality became too much for the household to hold. And so your body began to associate feeling good with the threat of rupture, with the risk of being too much, with the danger of being cast out from the only source of love you had. This is somatic conditioning. Your nervous system learning to apply the brake the moment happiness accelerates beyond the threshold your family could tolerate. Physical symptoms arrive, the migraine, the nausea, the sudden exhaustion, not as random afflictions, but as enforcement mechanisms. Your body has become the keeper of the silent contract, the one who ensures you never stray too far from the agreed-upon range of acceptable aliveness. And if you were the good child, the responsible one, the helper, the one who held it all together, you learned something even more binding. You became the caretaker to your own caregivers. Somewhere along the way, the roles reversed and you found yourself managing your parents' emotions, carrying their burdens, making sure they were okay before you allowed yourself to exist fully. This is parentification, and it doesn't just steal your childhood. It fuses your identity to a single, exhausting mission: being useful. Your self-worth became contingent on your service to the family's emotional economy. You learned that your value wasn't inherent. It was earned through what you could give, what you could carry, what you could absorb so that others didn't have to. And now, as an adult, you can't rest, because rest means you're no longer useful. Rest means you've stopped earning your right to exist. You manufacture tasks, create problems to solve, find new ways to prove your worth through exhaustion. Because the good child never learned that they were allowed to stop being good, that they were allowed to just be. And if you come from a culture where the individual is meant to serve the collective, where filial piety, familism, or duty to the lineage are encoded as the highest virtues, this pattern doesn't just live in your family, it lives in the entire world that raised you. In many traditions, goodness is defined by self-denial, by obedience, by putting your own desires last. Personal happiness isn't celebrated, it's culturally coded as selfishness, as moral corruption, as the abandonment of everything sacred. You're not just fighting the internalized voices of your parents, you're fighting the collective voice of generations who believed that to prioritize yourself was to betray the clan. And now you live between two worlds: the ancestral obligation that says you exist to serve, and the modern context that says you're allowed to thrive. The old script and the new possibility. But the old script is louder, it's older, it's written in the marrow of your bones. And so you feel the clash every time you choose yourself, every time you set a boundary, every time you allow yourself to feel good without immediately searching for the cost. The guilt arrives not just from your family, but from the entire lineage standing behind them, asking, "Who do you think you are?" And the answer you've learned to give, the only answer that feels safe, is, "I'm no one. I'm not special. I don't deserve more than what you had." Because to claim more would be to step outside the circle, to become unrecognizable to the ancestors whose approval you still seek, even though they've been gone for decades. This is the multi-dimensional bind. It's not just in your mind, it's in your body, it's in your family, it's in your culture, and it's in the way all three have conspired to teach you that the price of belonging is the abandonment of joy. But even knowing all of this, even seeing the mechanism in its full complexity, many people still believe there's a simpler solution. They think if they can just get far enough away, the pattern will finally break. Maybe you thought the answer was distance. You moved across the country. You stopped answering every call. You built walls high enough that their voices couldn't reach you anymore. You believed that if you could just get far enough away, the guilt would finally release its grip. But you can divorce your parents physically without ever divorcing them psychologically, because the ledger doesn't live in their house, it lives in yours. The internal accounting system, the one that tracks what you owe, what you've taken, what you can never repay, doesn't require their physical presence to keep running. In fact, the cutoff often intensifies the guilt, because leaving becomes the ultimate betrayal in the loyalty framework. The final proof that you've abandoned them. And now, thousands of miles away, you still sabotage your happiness. Still manufacture crises, still feel the weight of their disappointment as if they're in the next room. The cutoff freezes the dynamic in time, because there's no new interaction, no new information to update the old internalized voices. They stay exactly as they were the day you left, critical, hurt, unable to witness your joy without pain. And they loop endlessly in your mind, unchanged and unchanging. This is what you discover in the silence. That invisible loyalty doesn't require physical proximity to operate. You built a beautiful life in a new city. You have work you love, people who see you, moments of genuine peace. And still, when something good happens, the first thing you feel is guilt. When you sit down to rest, anxiety floods in. When success arrives, your body collapses. Because the contract you're trying to escape isn't with the people you left, it's with the versions of them you carry inside you. The internalized parents who watch everything you do, who measure your joy against their pain, who ask, without words, why you get to be happy when they never were. And you realize you can't outrun what lives inside you. Distance was never the solution. It was just another form of the same pattern, trying to solve a relational problem through separation instead of transformation. You know the guilt is still running the show when you notice these patterns showing up, even in your new life, even in your supposed freedom. You minimize your achievements when you talk to your family, turning every success story into a complaint. I got the promotion, but the workload is impossible. You're still protecting them from the truth of how well you're doing. After good fortune arrives, an unexpected bonus, a loving relationship, a moment of ease, you immediately give it away. Overgiving becomes your guilt tax, the price you pay for being allowed to exist in abundance. You get physically sick right after positive events. The migraine that arrives the day after the celebration. The flu that hits when you finally have time off. Your body still enforcing the contract your mind tried to escape. You can't sit in peace without manufacturing something to worry about. Rest feels dangerous. Stillness feels like laziness. You need the struggle to feel like you're still one of them. And even here, even now, in this life you built from scratch, you still feel like an imposter in your own success, like you're getting away with something, like any moment someone will discover you don't deserve this and take it all away. This is how you know the work isn't done. Distance created safety, but it didn't create freedom. True freedom requires something else entirely, something you can't achieve by running, something that can only happen when you finally turn around and face the contract at its source, not by rejecting your family, but by transforming how you hold your connection to them. The transformation begins not with cutting ties, but with seeing clearly. Your parents weren't monsters. They weren't villains who conspired to trap you in guilt. They were debtors in their own generational ledgers, people who tried to give you what they themselves had never received. Your mother couldn't love you the way you needed because she was never loved that way herself. She was unpaid by her own mother, left empty-handed when it came to permission, encouragement, or the spaciousness to become fully herself. And you can't give what you don't have. Your father couldn't celebrate your success because his own potential was crushed before it could bloom. His limitation wasn't a choice. It was the inheritance he received, the ceiling that was already in place when he arrived. This is exoneration, not excusing the harm, not pretending it didn't hurt, but seeing them as human, as people who were once children themselves, carrying debts they never asked for, trying to survive systems that were rigged against thriving. And when you can see this, when you can hold the truth that they were both the ones who hurt you and the ones who were hurt, something shifts. You stop trying to extract payment from them. You stop waiting for them to give you the love they never had to give. You stop needing them to be different before you can be free. And most importantly, you stop punishing yourself to punish them, because you finally understand your suffering doesn't correct their suffering. It just continues it. And now you can begin to rewrite the story you've been telling yourself about what your happiness means. The guilt has been whispering a single narrative your entire life. Your joy is theft. Your ease is betrayal. Your happiness costs someone else their peace. But what if that's not the truth? What if that's just the script that was handed to you? A story written by people who couldn't imagine another way. You can externalize the guilt now. You can see it not as who you are, but as a character that's been living inside you, following an old script that no longer serves. You might even write it a letter. I know you've been trying to keep me connected to my family. I know your method was suffering, dimming my light, carrying their pain, proving I haven't forgotten. But your method isn't working anymore. It's not bringing us closer. It's just keeping all of us stuck in the same pattern. And then you offer a new frame, a different story about what your happiness actually means. Your joy is not theft from the lineage. It's the harvest of the lineage. The ancestors didn't suffer so that you could replicate their suffering in a different form. They endured so that someone, someday, could finally breathe. They carried the weight so that the weight wouldn't have to be carried forever. To refuse your happiness, to sabotage your peace, to stay small out of loyalty, isn't honoring their sacrifice. It's wasting it. This is the pivot that changes everything. You can transform the nature of your loyalty without abandoning it. You don't have to stop loving your family. You don't have to cut them out or pretend they don't matter. You just have to shift your allegiance from loyalty to their suffering to loyalty to their potential. From devotion to the past to devotion to the future. Because when you stay stuck, you're not just limiting yourself. You're ensuring that the pattern continues, that your children, if you have them, will inherit the same ceiling, that the lineage remains frozen in the trauma it never chose. But when you break free, when you finally allow yourself to be happy, to thrive, to live beyond the limitations that were handed to you, you become the one who interrupts the transmission. You become the ancestor future generations will look back on and say, that's where it changed. That's the one who finally carried the light forward instead of staying in the dark to keep the others company. Your thriving is not betrayal. It's the payment the lineage has been waiting for. It's the fulfillment of every dream that was deferred, every potential that was buried, every life that was lived in service to survival instead of flourishing. This is what it means to honor them, not by repeating their darkness, but by being the one brave enough to step into the light they couldn't reach. Not because they were weak, but because they were carrying you. And now it's your turn to carry what they made possible. The breaking of the chain doesn't dishonor them, it completes them. But transformation doesn't happen in understanding alone. It happens in the daily practice of living differently, of making new choices even when the old patterns pull hard. Understanding the shift is one thing, living it is another. Because now comes the practice, the daily work of learning to say, I am happy, without immediately apologizing for it, without minimizing it, without searching for the cost. This is what differentiation actually looks like, the ability to hold your own experience as separate from theirs, to know that your joy doesn't injure them, even when their face suggests otherwise. You share good news with your mother, and you watch her expression tighten. The old reflex is to rush in, to fix it, to make yourself smaller so she doesn't have to feel whatever she's feeling. But the new practice is to stay steady in your own truth. I am happy. Full stop. No apology attached, because their discomfort isn't caused by your happiness. It's caused by their unhealed relationship with their own unlived life. You're not the wound, you're the mirror. And learning to hold that distinction without collapsing into guilt is the work of a lifetime. You practice tolerating the tension of disagreement without abandoning yourself. You learn that connection doesn't require merger, that you can stay related to them while maintaining your own selfhood. And slowly, conversation by conversation, choice by choice, you withdraw from the agreement you never consciously signed. I will not dim my light to match your darkness. I will not stay stuck to prove I haven't abandoned you. I will honor you by living fully, not by replicating your limitation. This is the conscious renegotiation. You're not severing the bond, you're transforming it. You're saying, my loyalty to you no longer requires my suffering. My love for you can coexist with my freedom. And when good news arrives, you let it be unqualified. You don't rush to add the complaint that makes it palatable. You practice allowing your joy to exist in the open air without dressing it up as struggle. This feels dangerous at first, exposing. Like you're violating something sacred, but you stay with it anyway. Because joy, you're learning, is not a transgression. It's a spiritual act. It's the way you say to the lineage, I'm using what you gave me. I'm becoming what you couldn't. And that's not betrayal, it's completion. And your body needs to learn this too, because the brake system is still there, still ready to engage the moment you accelerate past the old threshold. You notice it now, the tightness in your chest when something good happens, the wave of nausea when success arrives, the fatigue that floods in when you finally allow yourself to rest. But instead of obeying the alarm, you stay with the discomfort. You breathe through the sensation of the upper limit without immediately sabotaging to drop back down. You're building tolerance for sustained joy, teaching your nervous system that feeling good doesn't have to lead to punishment, that ease can be safe, that you can inhabit your own happiness without waiting for the other shoe to drop. This is slow work, tedious work, the kind that doesn't happen in a single revelation, but through 1,000 small choices to not collapse when the guilt arrives. And you learn finally that you can share your achievements without needing a specific response. You can tell them about the promotion, the relationship, the life you're building, and their reaction is their responsibility, not yours. If they can celebrate with you, beautiful. If they can't, that's their limitation to carry, not yours to manage. You stay connected, but you don't merge. You love them, but you don't disappear into them. And this refusal to abandon yourself in order to stay close to them is the truest form of loyalty you've ever offered. Because you're finally teaching the lineage something it never learned, that love doesn't have to cost you everything. You've traveled far to arrive here, to this understanding that the guilt you've carried was never about your inadequacy. It was about your profound capacity to love. You cared enough to carry their pain. You stayed loyal enough to limit yourself. You loved them so deeply that you were willing to abandon your own joy just to keep them company in their suffering. That's not weakness. That's not pathology. That's the mark of someone whose heart is wide enough to hold the weight of generations. But here's what you're learning now. The weight was never yours to bear alone, and the way you've been carrying it, through your own diminishment, through the break on your happiness, through the silent contract that says your thriving is their abandonment. That way doesn't actually serve them. It just perpetuates the pattern. It ensures that the limitation gets passed down one more time. No one can give you permission to be happy. Not your parents, not your culture, not the ancestors whose approval you've been seeking your entire life. The permission has to come from you. And it has to come with the understanding that your happiness doesn't diminish their struggle. It illuminates it. It gives it meaning. It becomes the answer to the question their lives were asking. This is what it means to move from being the guilty survivor to being the thriving descendant. You stop apologizing for your joy. You stop sabotaging your success. You stop manufacturing crises to prove you haven't forgotten where you came from, because you finally understand. Honoring the lineage doesn't mean staying in the prison they couldn't escape. It means being the one who walks through the door they spent their lives trying to unlock. The guilt you feel isn't the truth about your morality. It's the truth about your history. It's the echo of a silent contract signed by a child who believed that joy would cost them their connection to everything that mattered. But you're not that child anymore, and the contract can be renegotiated. Freedom doesn't come from severing the ties that bind you. It comes from transforming them, from learning to stay connected to your family while maintaining your own selfhood, from loving them without disappearing into them. And when you do this work, when you finally allow yourself to flourish without guilt, to thrive without apology, you pay the ultimate debt to the lineage, because you realize the potential that was dormant in those who came before you. You become the light they couldn't carry. You live the life they made possible, but couldn't live themselves. And that's not betrayal. That's completion. This work of unraveling invisible loyalties, of learning to hold both love for your family and permission for your own joy, is some of the most profound work you will ever do. Thank you for embarking on this journey with me. If this video resonated with you, I invite you to like and subscribe to our channel. Share this video with others so they can benefit from this message. And don't forget to leave a comment below, sharing your thoughts, reflections, and experiences. Thanks again for watching and for joining me. Take care and see you soon.